welcome. Joe Biden has become totally delusional. Delusional he's become. The Saudi crown prince is refusing to take Biden's calls, and he has the temerity to say that India is being shaky. Biden is begging the Venezuelans to give him a little bit of extra oil, but he says that India is on shaky ground. America fled Afghanistan with their incompetence exhibited in frightening pictures of Afghans hanging on to the wheels of their transport aircraft. But he says, no, India is being shaky about Ukraine. This is his war. He started it. And he needs to take both the responsibility and accountability for it. America has absolutely no business attacking us anymore, when it is they who have provided the spark that's led to the bloodiest and most unending of all wars. America is a mess. It's a complete mess. And we made it clear to the Americans that the only corner that we are in is the Indian corner. By refusing to ally completely with a shaky America, we have grown in stature and re-established the core of our really independent foreign policy. There's nothing shaky about it. There's something very decisive about it. India will not clean up America's mess. They've littered the whole world over the decades with their war machine. It's their litter, and they should clean up their act, ladies and gentlemen. We're debating who's shaky tonight. Biden did not need to make that comment. America, mind your own business, we say. That's debate one. Debate two tonight. What appears to be a case of revenge killings, children and women killed in Bengal after Trinamool Congress leader was killed. This is a level of violence that's really worrying. The Rampur Hart violence. Who's responsible? Debate number two. And a special segment after 10:30. The owner and the mentor of the newest IPL edition, the Lucknow Super Giants, speak to me in a special interaction. They've got a great video coming up. All this and more, ladies and gentlemen, and here are the headlines. This Tuesday evening on the debate tonight.
In the Pacific, the Quad is, with the possible exception of India being somewhat shaky on some of this, but Japan has been extremely strong, so is Australia.
3 days before he heads to Poland, Joe Biden says India is looking shaky on its stand on Ukraine. India sends a strong message as Washington tries to ramp up the pressure with back-to-back comments. As Russia fires hypersonic missiles, even America admits it can do nothing to stop or even intercept them.
और बदला कैसा? फायर ब्रिगेड के कर्मचारी हैं, वो बता रहे हैं कि जब वो आग बुझाने वहां पहुंचे कि उनको रोक दिया जाता है कि आग ना बुझा पाए.
8, including 2 children killed in political violence in Bengal, their homes burned down in ghastly violence in Birbhum. The BJP asked the center to intervene as the political blame game breaks out. 11 arrested, but it's a case of too little, too late.
We are 1.5 billion people, and yet our voice to stop this blatant injustice is insignificant.
Well, he tries to address the Islamic world, but the fact is he's looking extremely nervous. Republic has information that the army has asked Imran Khan to step down as Pakistan's Prime Minister. The one thing about Joe Biden is that he always makes the wrong comments and then he has to go back on his own words. He's been threatening Venezuela. All of the Americans have been threatening Venezuela. Now they're begging them for oil. He was the one who took on the Saudis. He said, I don't even recognize MBS. And he said, I'm going to teach them a lesson. He even refused to recognize the Crown Prince. And now he's begging for a phone call. And now he says, can you believe it? He says, India is the shaky country. America has been shaking since day one on its stand on Ukraine. America has been shaky on Afghanistan. America is shaky on Taiwan, to name a few. And America is saying that India is looking shaky instead. Joe Biden and America are basically unable to accept the fact or digest the fact that we will not take sides. Let's debate.
US has been trying to lecture India on its stand on Ukraine war, from asking India to be mindful of repercussions to vaguely threatening sanctions, and now calling India a shaky. Here is how it is going.
In the Pacific, the Quad is, with the possible exception of India being somewhat shaky on some of this, but Japan has been extremely strong, so has Australia, in terms of dealing with Putin's aggression. We presented a united front throughout NATO and the Pacific, and you did a hell of a lot to help us impose sanctions and incur costs, real cost on the Russian economy.
Well, it does not come across as a surprise when the United States of America is making a comment about the position that has been taken by India. But let's make that very clear. What is the position that India has taken at this stage? That is a neutral position, but calling in for a peaceful resolution.
India has stood firm from talking to Putin and then to Zelensky asking for talks. India has been consistent by saying that we need to take the mid path and put India's interests first.
In the financial years 2018-19, 19-20, 20-21 and the first 9 months of the current financial year, our total imports of crude from Russia have been 0.6%, 1.3%, 0.3% and 0.2%, which means that even the less than 1% figure of imports from Russia will take a long time to fill at the current rate.
From its position in Afghanistan to Ukraine's NATO induction, to its stand on Taiwan and its human rights records, if there is one country whose position is shaky in the record of its policy, it is only America.
Well, our message to any country continues to be that obviously abide by the sanctions, but that we have put in place and recommended. I don't believe this would be violating that, but also think about where you want to stand when the history books are written in this moment in time.
Fact is, India's diplomatic position on the Ukraine war is globally appreciated. Some of its own allies still buying Russian oil. And if there is one country whose position is globally questioned, it is of Uncle Sam, who is shaky.
This evening, I have with me Dr. Lawrence Sellin, retired U.S. Army Colonel, Peter Kuznick, Professor at the American University. We have with us Burzin Wagmar, who's a member of the SOAS South Asia Institute. He's joining us from London. And from The Hague, we have Taras Kuzio, who's Associate Research Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, and he's a professor at the National University of Kiev Mohila Academy. He's also been head of mission at NATO's Information and Documentation Center in Kiev. Thank you very much, Mr. Kuzio, Mr. Wagmar, Peter, and Dr. Lawrence Sellin. From the Indian side, I have Captain Alok Bansal, who's the director of the India Foundation. We have Sushant Sareen, senior fellow at ORF, and Brahma Chelani. My first question goes to you, and I'm opening this round with Brahma Chelani and Peter Kuznick. Brahma Chelani is author and professor of strategic studies at the Center for Policy Research, a fellow at the Robert Bosch Academy in Berlin. Dr. Chelani, I was surprised, you know. In fact, you keep watching Joe Biden, and I'm just being polite about it. I don't know what he says anymore, and I don't think he himself understands much of what he says anymore. I mean, it was embarrassing to see the way he had to be prompted by someone else and then go back and call Putin a war criminal. But now to say India is being shaky is a major statement. I mean, you see, he is directly taking on India. And I don't see where this provocation came from. Why has he made this statement? Is it a pressure tactic or just another Biden remark?
Well, unlike Trump, who spoke from the heart, Biden is a scripted president. He was reading from a script.
Okay.
So obviously his remark was intentional.
Okay.
But it was an insensitive remark because it comes at a time when India confronts China's border aggression, including China's threat of a full-scale war. But Biden won't open his mouth on that aggression. He has not said a word on that aggression. Yet he is criticizing the Indian response to a distant war that Biden helped provoke with an aggressive forward policy. Why should India take sides in a war that is being fought between two major great powers, Russia and the United States?
Yes.
Biden wants to entangle India in his new Cold War with Russia. In fact, he has two key objectives. One is to drive a wedge between China and Russia by using the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And the second key objective that the US is pursuing at the moment is to undermine India's independent foreign policy by forcing India to burn its bridges with Moscow and become a US client state.
Exactly.
I think Washington will achieve neither objective.
Peter, trying to create an atmosphere of pressure, despite the fact that we made our stand crystal clear, is only going to peeve India more. I mean, America is on shaky ground on oil. After sanctioning Venezuela, Iran, and now Russia, you're running behind the Iranians and the Venezuelans and saying all is forgiven if you come with us. America is on shaky ground with MBS. Saudi Arabia is the source of 6 to 7% of the oil. But the country has the capacity to produce more oil or less oil. They're saying, we're not going to help you. So America is on shaky ground, but now to try and take on India in this way, I think was wholly unnecessary. What is the purpose? What does America gain by taking India on like this at this time?
Well, judging from your response, if that's reflective of the way the Indian people are reacting, then the United States is not gaining anything. What Biden was trying to do, and I think you're being a little too sensitive to the accusation of being shaky. That's not a harsh condemnation. We've heard harsh condemnations. Biden has called Putin a war criminal, a thug, a killer. He's referred similarly to Xi Jinping. Shaky is a compliment from Biden. What Biden is trying to say now, and I think the important point to be made, it's not that India is buying a little bit more Russian oil compared to what the Europeans are buying. This is a tiny fraction of what the Europeans are buying. What I think I would like to see India do is act as an aggressive peacemaker. I'd like to see Xi Jinping, your enemy, and I'd like to see Modi, your leader, intervene directly with Putin and get him to stop this war as soon as possible. That's the role India should be playing. We realize that this is a war that could, as everyone is warning, turn into World War III. If it's World War III and we go to nuclear war, which is a real possibility, there won't be anybody left in India any more than there'll be anybody left in the United States or Russia or China. So that's what confronts humanity now. We're in a terrible situation. The United States certainly could have done more to prevent it, but the immediate aggression is by Russia. And it's going to be Putin who can end this.
Yeah, but the thing is, my concern is about the tone, the manner, and you'll say to me, Peter, it doesn't matter the tone and manner. But then I think, my question is, Captain Bansal, that there is a way in which you deal with fellow countries and countries of tremendous significance like India. You don't speak as if it should be a custom that we should be, walking with the Americans on everything. I mean, I think this language, he's got a language problem here. And I'm not over-interpreting this. It was Biden who said that Saudi Arabia is a pariah state. I mean, I say, who are the Americans to call anyone pariahs? Why was Saudi Arabia called a pariah state? And now he's having to change that. Choice of words. Captain Bansal, what do you think?
There is no doubt about it that he has had to backtrack on many of these issues. But US foreign policy under Biden administration has been on the back foot. In fact, the manner in which they pulled out of Kabul, a country with which they had a strategic partnership agreement where they left the country to dogs, I think has dented American credibility to a very, very great extent. And now with that sort of a credibility, we see that MBS, MBZ are not even taking their calls because he had earlier made certain nasty comments against them. And now in this particular conflict, I think India has maintained the right stance because this war will only end when a third country mediates. And the third country mediation is only possible if the country maintains a neutrality and an equal stance. If you are already on one side, you cannot do anything to stop this war. And this war needs to be stopped. It cannot be stopped by sanctions. The sanctions are ineffective. They were ineffective against Iraq, they were ineffective against Iran, and they're going to be ineffective against Putin. That's a fact. The Europe will have a heavy cost to pay. So what does US want us to do?
You see, Dr. Selin, let me, here's how I look at it. And Peter, I'm not being oversensitive, I'm not overreacting. I just think that America is being very impractical and being very knee-jerk, because if this matter is to be solved, it has to be solved with the intervention of some significant country which is fairly neutral, right? And I think calling out India like this and then trying to publicly pressure India like this is not going to help America's interests in the long term. India has been one of the first countries to call for a NATO and Russia dialogue. We've called for member states to respect sovereignty. We've called for a ceasefire. We've sent 20 tranches of massive humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Prime Minister Modi has spoken to Zelensky, to Putin. So I'm just saying that if you are to find a solution, Dr. Lawrence Selin, a country like India can play a role, but we can't play a role if there is going to be this, attempt to admonish the world's largest democracy. America can't be seen to be trying to admonish India. This is in fact going to have the opposite reaction. Dr. Selin, I'm totally surprised and flabbergasted at the choice of words, especially since it came from a written comment.
Well, I think it shows a profound lack of understanding by the Biden administration of South Asia. India is a Quad nation. It has also had very good relations with Russia for a very long time. So I agree with Peter from the standpoint that we shouldn't be criticizing India. We should be leveraging India's place in the world, especially in relation to Russia, that could potentially act as a mediator in this conflict. So it was the words that Biden used, I think, were very unfortunate. Now, there also seems to be a profound lack of understanding about the difference between NATO and the Quad agreement. NATO is primarily a military alliance, whereas Quad is not. So I think there's a misunderstanding there that perhaps Biden expected India to follow along like a NATO.
Like a NATO ally, yes. Fundamental mistake. Wouldn't he factor that in, Dr. Selin? India is not a NATO country. We will never be. And I think Sushant, somewhere, is it that, it's a deliberate attempt? I mean, I think that America has thrust its allies on shaky ground. It's thrust all its allies on shaky ground, and even Israel is busy mediating and not isolating Putin. Will tomorrow, will America say that Israel is also on shaky ground? South Africa blames NATO, refuses to condemn Russia. Will Biden say tomorrow South Africa is also on shaky ground? Sushant.
Okay, so Arnab, here is the thing. You and I, we are not often on the opposing sides of the debate, but last two times, I think I've taken a somewhat more contrarian position, and I will take a somewhat more contrarian but nuanced position today. And my point is that perhaps we are tilting at the windmills. and I agree with what Peter said, that normally if the Americans have to be really obnoxious, and they can be very obnoxious diplomatically, then the language which they used is very bad. Okay? I think what Mr. Biden spoke today was in a certain context, and when he first spoke about NATO, then he came to the Quad and he said, look, in the Quad, basically all the countries are together, but India is a little shaky on some of the things. That was the exact thing which he said. Now, in a way, it's a statement of fact, because we as India has taken a very nuanced position. We haven't criticized the Russians, we haven't endorsed them.
Yeah.
We do not support what the Russians have done, but we are not going public with our criticism, or we are not condemning them openly. Perhaps the Americans and some of their other allies expect that we will do this, something which the Germans, while they are buying the Russian oil and they're doing all sorts of other business with them, they have spoken very harshly against the Russians. Number three, I take your point well that, India is not a country, and frankly, I think we should be prickly when somebody, takes a swipe at us. But I don't think Biden was taking a swipe at us, and I'll say this for two reasons. They took a swipe at the Pakistanis, for example. Again, I'm not comparing India with Pakistan, but just using Pakistan as an example. When, the EU ambassadors came out publicly with a statement, the Americans have been coming out publicly with statements and telling the Pakistanis what is expected of them. I don't think anybody has said that to us. Secondly, I think within the American establishment, there is a large degree of understanding of the predicament in which India finds itself. Now, there could be some think tankers, there could be some of the usual suspects who are Modi baiters, India baiters in the American think tank circuit, who will be flying off the handle that why have we bought 3 million barrels of oil? 3 million barrels is half of the oil, or 60% of the oil which we buy in a day. Okay, so if we bought 3 million barrels, it's nothing. It's a drop in the ocean. And it's not going to fuel the Putin war machine. So, but they are, they are blowing it up as though some grave injustice is being committed by India, as though some sanctions are being busted.
No.
But I don't see that coming from the US administration. So I think there has been a lot of understanding on the Indian stand. I'm sure they would want us to take a stand which is much more emphatic against the Russian invasion. We haven't done it so far, for our own reasons, and I think they understand our reasons.
Yeah,
but I don't think we should tilt at the windmills. Because look, if we are, Arnab, and this is important, if we consider ourselves to be big power, if we consider ourselves to be an important country, then one comment by somebody should not, get us all head up.
One minute.
I think we should take it with a greater degree of equanimity and assuredness.
Let me just say this one. Sushant, I respect you a great deal, and even more if you're taking a contrarian position from mine, but I don't think you're understanding where I'm coming from. Where I'm coming from is this, that see, America is the most transactional country in the world. It is the country which uses the most levers.
Arnab, all countries in the world are transactional.
Sure, so are we. We should be. But I'm saying at the same time, all countries are transactional. My counter to you, this is the problem. This is where I gravitate from being an anchor to a panelist, because people like you provoke me. I'll make 2 points and hand it over to Burzin here. You see, the fact is, point number one, I have no problem. But Americans preach so much. You're saying one comment? No, Sushant, for 1 month. For 1 month, these Americans have been preaching to us, save democracy, save the free world, save liberal democracy. I mean, come on. You started a war. You want us to save the situation. It is not our war. This is not a war for democracy. It is not a war for the free world. It is a war for defending territorial and strategic interests of two different blocs. So I'm a bit irritated, because all I've heard is, Americans were out to save the world. Zelensky was going to save the world until the bad Putin came in. It's not as simplistic as that. The second point is, Sushant, you say the Americans tend to talk worse to us.
But I don't disagree with you on that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I disagree with you. But the second point is this, that you are saying the Americans can use worse language. I mean, for God's sake, we are not Papua New Guinea or Nicaragua. Who made them the school monitor?
But which is why...
Who made them the school monitor?
He just said that... we are not taking the kind of positions they are taking.
No, Burzin.
Nothing more, nothing less.
No, Burzin, you know, it's... Okay, Burzin. Okay, Burzin comes in, yeah.
Actually, Arnab, I'm sorry, I concur with Sushant. Much ado about nothing with Biden's tactless remark. Let's look at it this way. India's strategic autonomy pleases no one, and India knows it ends up pleasing nobody due to its hard-nosed pragmatism. New Delhi has cancelled a recent order of 29 MiG jets, and 11 Indian sorties have flown in 26 tons of air relief to Ukraine through Slovakia and Poland. So that's where India is. And if some think India is running with the hare and hunting with the hounds, well, that's just too bad. And of course, the Americans must privately realize where India is coming from. When a Putin is increasingly coming around to Imran Khan's thinking of recognizing the Taliban, a Putin is more vocal and voluble than Xi Jinping about India's inclusion in the Quad. So India is hemmed in with Afghanistan and China. Its options are of those between a rock and a hard place. It appreciates that. But putting aside these oil and other aspects, we've seen Russian military capability degenerated, and it's plainly one for all to see on our screens playing out. Shouldn't this be an opportunity for India to ramp up its domestic acquisition and modernization of procurement, which in the current budget, Arnab, I believe, is $16.6 billion? And 60% of India's defense expenditure is through domestic procurement. And from that, it follows suit that domestic industrial capacity of both your public and private sectors will be boosted in post-pandemic times through an earnings of, say, $10 billion for the fiscal year 2023. So let's look forward to this among other aspects.
No, I'm sure, but you know, I'm just... See, Burzin, see, I know, you know, there's been this building on pressure on India, and today's program is happening in the context of that pressure. Just had a press release while you were speaking that, you know, Boris Johnson just spoke to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and a full, you know, 10 Downing Street had put out a press release, and obviously both the UK now and Taras, I want to get you in, Taras Kuzio from The Hague. Welcome to Dr. Zachary Paikin joining us from Toronto. You know, I know that a lot of countries aligned to America are now calling on India to take a position which is anti-Russia. And I don't think this is practical or feasible at this point of time. And I think it is in the world's interest that India maintains its neutrality. Because if everybody were to take sides, this war will not end. What do you think? Mr. Kuzio, I'd like to come to you first from The Hague. Yes, sir.
Well, firstly, I think you need to correct your research a bit. You're accusing the United States of starting this war. I don't see US troops invading Ukraine. I see Russian troops invading Ukraine. So you need to maybe either get rid of your researchers and hire some new ones, or change your position. Because I don't get where your anti-Americanism is coming from. The United States has not invaded Ukraine. Russia has invaded Ukraine. It's an illegal action condemned by the United Nations in at least 3 resolutions, and is committing war crimes on a level that we have not seen in Europe since Srebrenica in Yugoslavia. So I think you should have a bit more sympathy to what's going on and stop using the Ukrainian war to harbor your anti-Americanism. Okay. And I'm saying that it's not an American. I'm not an American.
That's all right.
But secondly...
Can I respond to your first point? Can I respond to your first point?
I'd like to finish first, because I had enough of your wrong description of this war.
Well, that may be your opinion. You are free to your opinion, I'm free to mine.
It's Russian troops that are invading, not American troops. Get your bloody facts right.
Why don't you stop raising your voice, please? Because I'm not raising my voice with you.
You have been raising your voice. No. You're like a little child complaining about this American comment.
You're getting so sensitive.
Security complex.
You're so sensitive, so I want to have a debate with you. Are you ready to debate with me? Are you ready to? Are you ready to on fact?
Give me your.
Okay, so let me give you my fact. Okay, I'm going to enjoy this, Mr. Kuzio. First of all, I'm going to be pleasant and polite with you, and I request you to remain calm and maintain the same tone. We can debate with each other without getting, under each other's skin. I don't think there is any need for you to get so sensitive. Second point is, allow me.
I'm the sensitive one. You're the sensitive one, not me.
No, fine. I do these debates every day.
American
I'm not going to get into a personal debate with you, but I'll give you a couple of counterpoints. My first point to you is that I did not say that America has invaded Ukraine. If you were only to care to listen to everything I said appropriately, I said America provided the spark which has led to this bloodiest of all conflicts.
That's ridiculous.
No, you may say it's ridiculous, but that's my opinion. Listen, let's be clear. The second point is, you see, Victoria Nuland, who's their Undersecretary of State, said today that democracies need to stand together and evolve their position because it's an issue about democracy. Now, I'd like to ask you, Mr. Cuzio, since you accuse me of anti-Americanism, that is America in any place to preach values of democracy? Because America signed over 650 million air-to-air missiles to help the Saudis carpet bomb Yemen, pushing millions of Yemenis to the brink of starvation. Please answer me on that specific point. Let's be factual.
What's Yemen got to do with the debate about Ukraine?
God, okay, I'll try and repeat myself. The entire American argument has been one about democracies needing to stand together. And ad nauseum, I can give you a number of examples where in the context of Ukraine, the argument has been made on democracy. And I'm asking you that when almost $1 billion of air-to-air missiles were given to help the Saudis carpet bomb Yemen, creating a massive humanitarian disaster, was it to preserve democracy when the Yemenis were starving? Did I lose the link or did he run away? That's the problem. That's the precise problem. You see, the fact is, Captain Alok Bansal, I'm arguing factually. I think there's one block out here, and this is a problem. You see, Dr. Sachari Paikin, there is a second view to the world, which has to be heard. And I just want to tell my viewers, I'm still trying to get Karas Kuzio back. Dr. Paikin, you know, it's not that the world is getting sensitive with America, it's that America is talking down to the rest of the world and the rest of the world is talking back at it. That's how I view it. What do you think, Mr. Paikin?
Undoubtedly, there are multiple perspectives that coexist in today's world on this issue and on many other issues related to the future shape of the international order. Many in the West like to cite the fact that 141 countries condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine in a vote in the UN General Assembly. But at the same time, that reveals that roughly 1/4 of all countries at the United Nations did not vote to condemn it. That's a lot. That's a lot of countries that, for one reason or another, could not bring themselves to condemn what amounts to, by definition, in today's international order, the worst of all crimes, which is the crime of aggression. Right? In today's multilateral international order, you do not take territory by force. You do not invade your neighbor in an unprovoked fashion. And yet 1/4 of the countries in the United Nations could not bring themselves to condemn that. So obviously there's a diversity of perspectives that exist. There's certainly, in particular, a diversity of perspectives that exist in what is increasingly coming to be known as the Indo-Pacific region, as much as I may dislike that term.
Yes.
And that's where the global center of geopolitical gravity is going to be situated over the decades to come. So if the United States and other Western actors want to be able to play a constructive role in that region, and one in which their influence will be respected, they're going to have to understand the strategic promiscuity of the actors in that region and their desire not to have their own home, their own region, rigidly divided in a binary fashion the way that it was in the Euro-Atlantic space between NATO and Russia.
Quite brilliantly put, but I want to counter you on that as well, Dr. Paikin. If I may, actually, I'll bring in Captain Alok Bansal in on this, and I'd love Dr. Selin to come in. You see, point is, you said that in today's day and age, you can't invade countries. You can't just trample upon the territorial integrity of other countries and other peoples and create these kind of disasters. Dr. Paikin, my point is the biggest violator in this entire world in the last 100 years of the territorial rights of other nations, especially in the last 50 years, in the post-war years, has been the United States of America. It has just walked over, it has just invaded ad nauseum. I'm not saying two wrongs make a right, please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, Colonel Selin, that justifies another invasion. I'm not saying that justifies Putin's invasion. I'm just saying today that what happened? What happened? Did the United States ever condemn the Moroccan invasion of Western Sahara? Why should that not matter? The Moroccan invasion of Western Sahara was supported by the United States of America. So I'm just saying this, how many times, how can invasions be questioned by a country that is persistently only invaded on the basis of its own sense of global unipolarity? The problem is, Dr. Pekin, these questions are being asked in a more, you can say, a more vocal manner of late. You can accuse and say that, Arnab, why are these questions being asked now? I'm saying these questions are being asked because America is pointing a finger and preaching to the world. That's the only reason. I want Captain Alok Bansal to come in and understand our perspective of this. Captain Alok Bansal.
See, this is what I was trying to say, that while US did not invade Ukraine, US created conditions which led to this sort of a conflict. If you remember, when Soviet Union disintegrated, a lot of assurances were given to the Russian president at that point of time, which talked that there will be no eastward expansion of NATO. The very rationale of NATO after the disintegration of Soviet Union, to my mind, is debatable. And as far as invasions are concerned, I think the most blatant invasion and most unequal invasion was US invasion of Grenada. Could you justify that? Maurice Bishop's government and subsequent invasion of Grenada was, of course, the blatant aggression. Now, if you could justify that, now Russia had here some valid security concerns. I'm not trying to justify Russian invasion, but Russia did have certain valid security concerns with the eastward march of NATO, which kept moving eastward. It actually incorporated 3 from former Soviet republics. The Baltic republics were part of the Soviet Union, which were incorporated. Former Warsaw Pact countries, one after the other, kept joining NATO. And now Ukraine and Georgia were on the verge of joining NATO. So it did threaten Russia. What was the rationale of NATO when Warsaw Pact had folded up? That fact needs to be understood. And so there were some concerns. I'm not trying to justify again, not trying to justify invasion of Russia.
No, not at all.
But please remember, Minsk Accord was signed, where Luhansk and Donetsk were given certain amount of autonomy, which was again not respected by Kyiv.
No,
if we are actually respecting democracy, then the manner in which Viktor Yanukovych was removed from the presidency of Ukraine, was that democratic?
There are many questions. There are many questions which are emerging, but at the core, Colonel Selin, where we are coming from is this, that I think the way the world is positioned right now will need countries of significance economically and militarily like India to play a neutral role. To criticize India for being neutral may not be in global interest. And I think this is something which all mature countries need to understand. And I think America must be appreciative of India's neutrality here, because I think it is an asset in the long term. It may appear to be an irritant to America today, to Colonel Selin, but it's going to be an asset in the long term, I feel. What do you think?
Well, I certainly agree that India is an asset to the United States, and what role it plays in this particular conflict, it's up to India to decide. But let's go back to the original comment by Biden that upset everyone.
Yeah.
And I think it was inappropriate to say that. But where does it all come from? In the United States, we've just gone through over 5 years of Russian hysteria, starting with, the Trump hoax and going on. And this has been stoked by the Democrat Party and the media. So I think, what Biden is doing and the people around him are really an extension of this Russian hysteria, and them not thinking clearly about what they're saying, and putting pressure on India, I think in this case is unfortunate, because I think India can play a very constructive role because it has good relationships with Russia.
Sides.
And being in the Quad, it can act as a mediator in this case. So I think they're really missing an opportunity.
I actually would say this, I don't know, maybe Brahma is the better person to judge, and Sushant is on this. They are all the geopolitical experts. But I think the more economic leverage that we have with Russia, the better chances will be of a country like India playing a role. I mean, after all, how many economies of the size of India will be doing business with Russia? So I think there's a certain level of, instead of emotional responses, I think pragmatism would be a better response. What do you say, Brahma? I don't want to get into this finger wagging. I don't want to point to the Americans every day and say, you did this wrong, you did that wrong. No. But I think America must step back and look at possible roles that India can play if this remains unresolved for a few more days? Brahma.
Well, Arnab, I agree with you. My concern is this. I would like the US to retain its global preeminence. But the actions of Biden, especially the recent actions in starting a new Cold War with Russia and pouring military resources into Europe, create more space for China's expansionism, for China to supplant the US as the preeminent power in the Indo-Pacific. And whatever the outcome of the Ukraine war, there will be only one winner, and that winner will be China. China will strengthen itself at America's expense.
Yes.
And that also means more trouble for India.
Yes.
So the United States is being its own worst enemy. For years and years under successive presidents, from Richard Nixon to Barack Obama, the US helped create this monster, the Chinese communist monster. And even today, by going after Russia and imposing no sanctions of any kind in a meaningful manner against China, despite China detaining more than 1 million Muslims, despite China swallowing Hong Kong, despite China's expansionism in the South China Sea and the Himalayas, there are no meaningful Western sanctions against China. All this is undermining long-term American interests. So my worry is that with a single narrative dominating the American discourse today on the Ukraine war, and it's very rare to come across this kind of unity in American discourse. There are very few dissenting voices. Lawrence is one refreshing voice,
yes,
but there are not many people in the US willing to speak their mind, try to dissect issues in a way that seek to protect American long-term interests.
Yeah.
So given the unanimity in the American discourse and the fact that the US is going to come out a loser from this present confrontation with Russia, both Russia and the Americans will lose out and allow the Chinese to win.
I also, one point, and I want to bounce this off Burzin and Sushant, because right now in this last few minutes of the debate, we're getting into the analytical part. You know, Burzin, as someone who's very, very closely followed Modi's foreign policy, what is incredible about the way the Prime Minister Modi has dealt with this situation is there's not one provocative comment from him. No positioning. Not, we know, you have the Chinese who are saying, he who tied the bell to the tiger must take it off. It takes two hands to clap. That is the kind of statement coming from Xi Jinping. But as far as Prime Minister Modi is concerned, he's being completely mature, composed. And I feel America is not reading the signal. The Prime Minister of the world's largest democracy is leaving the door open. And I think Biden should not have said this. The reason I'm saying it is because it's not necessary to make the comment, given the fact that China is snubbing the US, even Turkey is snubbing the US, India is not snubbing the US. It's in no way.
Arnab, let me comment straight away on this.
Yes.
Xi Jinping's rubbish remarks are of no consequence, given that he wants a veneer of plausible deniability since he was in the know of this invasion.
Correct.
And that Putin obliged him because of his Winter Olympics shenanigans.
Yes.
Let's put that aside.
Agree.
But to come to India's positions and its matter-of-fact statements, New Delhi pointedly contradicted Moscow in the disinformation campaign, as you know, last week, and said no Indian students were killed. So India did not succumb to that and pointedly contradicted Moscow. And Modi's conversation with the EU Council President in the second week after the war commenced on 24th Feb was that India is in consonance with the UN Charter and that Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty is non-negotiable. In stating so, I'm sure there are those in the Beltway who would have appreciated, despite India's abstention vote, that this was Modi distancing himself from Putin's barnstorming aggression of Ukraine.
Yes, I completely agree, and I think this is going to be a case study eventually. So I think actually Actually, Sushant, we're on same ground here. You know, you may feel that I'm overreacting to the specific word, but in the way everyone on the panel, except one panelist who walked away, is looking at this situation is that I think there is a great role that India can play in the future on this, as far as this conflict is concerned.
Arnab, the panelist who walked away was trying to be more loyal than the king, so not important. But I think the issue which we are discussing, and I'll make three very quick points. One on Modi. Look, Modi was treated very shabbily when he was not prime minister, right? By the Americans, by the Brits, by the rest of them, and very unfairly. He was singled out, he was made out into a monster, he becomes prime minister. Unlike what MBS and some of the other people who are not taking Mr. Biden's call, Modi realized that India's interests are attached to the West.
Yes.
And he let the personal slights against him slide. And he went ahead and improved relations with the West much beyond anybody else had done in India. And I think we still stand by that particular posture, that our future in many ways lies with the West. And as Brahma very correctly said, that unlike in the maybe 60s or 70s when we had that socialistic hangover, I think India has a interest in seeing the United States remain the preeminent power for the foreseeable future, because it is a balancing force against all these characters like Xi Jinping and the rest of the thugs in China. So that is the second point. The third point I wanted to make is what boggles my mind is the lack of strategic foresight in the Americans. After, I could understand America does not like Saddam Hussein, fine. But after 9/11, when your real enemy was Islamic fundamentalism and radicalism, Al-Qaeda and all of that, to go after Saddam, who was as much of an enemy of these fellows, was crazy. It didn't make sense. And what you unleashed was something much worse than what you were trying to fight.
Exactly.
The same logic applies between China and Russia.
Yeah.
Compare China and Russia. Does Russia really pose any significant threat to United States preeminence in the world?
Yes.
Or does China pose it? In the 70s, the Americans were smart enough to pick up China and use it as a lever against Russia.
Correct.
Now they have turned that entire logic on its head, and they are pushing Russia into China's embrace, which doesn't make any strategic sense.
It doesn't at all.
And frankly, this Ukraine war is so unnecessary because it could have been very easily addressed by diplomacy.
Yes.
Without having to badmouth. You don't have to like Mr. Putin or his style of politics or his or as what many of the Westerners say, his thuggery. You don't have to like it. But then you look at the larger strategic chessboard and you say that, look, this guy is somebody I would rather have on my side than push him into Xi Jinping's arms.
Yeah.
And your real struggle and your real tussle is going to come with the Chinese rather than with the Russians.
No, I think
this is a distraction and an unnecessary one.
I think that you're so right here. Everything's changed after Ukraine. If Ukraine had not escalated, then China in a few months would have been economically, politically and diplomatically isolated completely. And I think that's a lost opportunity for America and all those democracies who have been on America's side. So I think Biden is making mistakes. They need to really reassess the way they've been behaving. But it's been a great discussion. I thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. And on the other side tonight, on debate number 2, what has happened in Bengal is a matter of great concern. The way in which people have been butchered in Birbhum. More